Hi everyone, and welcome along to Pancake Day. And to celebrate Shrove Tuesday, we're going to be painting some watercolour pancakes. Now the picture was shared. If you're going to paint along, then you should have drawn it out first. So there's my sketch down. Before we get started, I've got a pancake. Yay! I have to say, this is not one that I made myself, okay? This is one bought from the shop. Now, traditionally, I don't know about you, but in my household, when growing up, our pancakes were more like crepes, very thin, served with lemon and sugar. But these are much nicer, I think. And look at the pattern and the colours. So we're going to use a limited colour palette today, mostly burnt sienna and Hansa yellow. You could also use lemon yellow, a little bit of Friends grey, and a bit of magenta for that orangey syrup on the top. So all of my watercolour classes, if you're new to Watercolour Wednesday or Watercolour Tuesday as we're speaking now, I use this same limited colour palette for all of my classes. So you learn to mix your colours as well, and you get great harmony in your paintings. If you are live and you're signed in, there is a chat bar, so any questions, ask away. So that's the reference image. This is, I'm going to eat this as we paint. There's one I've started already. Look, there's a chunk taken out of this one. Oh, keep us energized. Okay, so as well as the colours, I'm working on cold pressed paper. This is a watercolour block by Bockingford, and I've sketched out in water soluble graphite. That means your lines will disappear as it gets wet. I'll be using a size 12 and size 6 brush for all of the painting. You should have a hairdryer to hand. I haven't got my hairdryer, so if I need it, I'm going to have to dash off and get my hairdryer in case we need to dry some layers off. In fact, if you've not sketched it, I'm going to go and grab my hairdryer now. I'll be back in one sec. I thought I had everything prepared, but clearly not. Let me just plug that hairdryer in case we need it. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to disappear off the screen now, and we'll make a start on the painting. Okay. It's always good if you can print your reference picture off to have it nearby. The picture will stay at the top of the screen throughout. So we're going to start with the base colour of the pancakes. So we want a kind of yellow ochre effect. So I'm going to take my Hansa yellow and some water into my puddle. And to turn that more ochre, I'm going to add a bit of burnt sienna to it. Okay, clean your brush, pick up your next colour, a little bit at a time, and we should get a nice golden ochre colour. Touch more. Beautiful. Just going to mix a bit more so I don't run out. And just test your colour down on a scrap of paper. There we go. So wet on to dry, nice and light. You'll notice I've drawn my syrup, and I'm painting around the syrup. Okay, so don't go over the syrup. We're just going to paint around. this lovely golden colour to our pancakes. And I'm kind of spreading my colour a bit thinner as I come to the edge, because looking at the reference picture it's lighter on the right hand side on the top. And we're just going to take our way nice and slowly around our pancakes. So coming down the bottom of the top pancake, and we're working with really pale colours. Just avoid your syrup. We're going to treat that separately. And we're going to add a bit more colour into this with burnt sienna as we go. There's a bit of green on my brush. I don't know where that came from. Let me just lift that out. Green pancakes, that would be interesting. Okay, carrying on down. Nice and light, your colours should be transparent. And I'm not going all the way to join up with the pancake on top. I'm leaving a little gap between the pancakes.
The uplifting power pair with collagen technology for firmer, glowing and plump skin. Estee Lauder.
Keep looking at that reference picture for the clues as to where to put your colour. Again, avoiding the syrup. Leave a little gap between each pancake. Now I've picked up a little bit extra burnt sienna, so they're getting a little bit warmer, a little bit darker as I go down my stack. And lastly, one right at the bottom which looks a little bit squashed. Now I was reading with interest the history of the pancake race, and I'm in Northamptonshire, and not far from me in Bucks, literally a 20-minute drive away, is the village where the pancake race started, in a village called Olney. Okay, now whilst this is still damp, I'm going to come in to some more burnt sienna into my mix, making my puddle a little bit creamier. Yellow and burnt sienna, and I'm just going to come in, not too much water on the brush. The more water you have on the brush, the more fluid the paint will be. So dry your brush off first and then pick up some colour, and we're just going to dance around on the tip of the brush, creating some of the texture and the goldenness in our pancakes. Just have a bounce around, don't worry too much about where you're putting it. It's just a pattern that we're looking for. What I do want is it quite dark next to the edge of my syrup, so I'm making sure I'm putting a lot of colour right next to the runs of syrup. Let me mix up a little bit more. No one's chatting to me today. I hope we are live. Yes. Okay, so yellow and burnt sienna giving this gorgeous golden colour. Coming into these pancakes coming right up underneath the top pancake now on the tip of my brush, and we're going to build up this colour as we go. Let's get that separation in first. A little bit more burnt sienna in my mix, and again creating this pattern. My brush is fairly dry. Going to go back into that top layer, dab a few more dots so that they're not all the same colour. By going back in and adding some more as it starts to dry, your paint's going to move less. You create more of that lovely golden pattern. Okay, carrying on down, find your next layer. In we come on the tip of your brush. Popping that colour down. You don't want a straight edge either. These are organic. If they're made by me, they definitely wouldn't have a straight edge. And then to the next one, underneath, tuck in beside your syrup. It's a real fun one to do, and it's a lot healthier than eating them, although I'm doing both. Now as we go down we see less pattern, so we can just focus on the underside of each pancake. Going a little bit stronger with my burnt sienna into my mix. And I'm going to go back up to the top with that colour, taking that shadow underneath the pancake a little stronger. Trying not to dip my hand in the paint as I go. And that colour is just going to bleed gently into the colour underneath. A bit darker here, right along that edge on the very tip of my brush, tucking in behind the syrup or honey. Okay, carrying on down. Where I've put this dark line here, I'm just going to use a damp brush to encourage that burnt sienna to spread down a little way onto the next pancake. Just softening the edge with a damp brush. It's easy to lose your way on this stack, so that's that one. And then I want to come underneath again. Now I'm just going to clean my brush off and spread some of this colour a bit further down towards the folded edge of the pancake. And already we're starting to get that look. Going darker again now, back into the shadow. On the tip of the brush, a bit creamier with the paint to really get that distinction of the layers. Into the next one. So I'm putting my lighter colour down first. And your base colour is still damp. next one. Just coming along that join. Cleaning my brush off again and just spreading that down. Picking up a bit of that colour and spreading it down. Creamy burnt sienna again on a dry brush. On the tip, coming back in to create your stronger shadow. Fantastic, we're nearly there. Down to the bottom one, I'm staying with my creamy burnt sienna because this one's quite dark. It's at the bottom. Cleaning that brush off again and just picking up the colour I've just put down and spreading it out. Fabulous. Before the top really totally dries, I'm going to go back in and just dance around with this burnt sienna to add stronger again patterns on the surface of our pancake. The top one particularly, because you can see the markings where it's been fried. Under the butter, nice and strong. I'm just dancing around on the tip of my brush, just having fun with the colours.
Join millions of customers and make epic savings today. Little Plus app required.
Okay, now with this darker burnt sienna with a touch of yellow, we're going to come in and pick up these crispy edges, nice and creamy, and at this stage everything underneath should be nearly dry. So just coming in around that edge, trying not to lean my hand in my pancake. I'm just going to add some magenta to my mix now. I want this a bit more orangey. Burnt sienna, that's better. That's the colour. We're starting to go a bit too brown, so don't worry, just going to tap down and do that bit again. Going a bit more orangey this time, that's better. So just a bit of quinacridone magenta into my mix. Any pinky red will do the trick. And with that colour that I've just mixed, again I'm adding more pattern to the surface, and I want some dark spots, as I said, alongside my drizzling syrup. And the next one down as well, same again, I'm going to come underneath again, creating another layer, making it slightly darker. You can use your smaller brush if you feel more comfortable, and just adding some of that texture to the surface with random marks of my mix. Lovely. Just spreading some of those marks out a little bit so they join together. And I'm going to carry carry on with this colour. So this is repeating what we've done before. I'm just going to take a bit of this or more orangey brown now into some of these folds as another glaze. Just going across each one. Each layer, making them a bit more golden, a bit more appetizing. Looks good already, doesn't it? And then with a damp brush, I'm going to go back and just soften, and it needs to just be damp. Just soften underneath the colour so it gives the paint somewhere to go and it doesn't leave you with a hard line. Wipe your brush every now and again because you're going to pick up a bit of colour from underneath. Just a little bit, encouraging those two browns to merge together. This one needs to be a bit more golden. Back to my very top one and just darkening it again with another layer. Now before this fully dries, I'm now going to take my Friends Grey into my browns, bit of brown, bit of Friends Grey, to make a really dark brown, really dark, almost grey. So burnt sienna, Payne's Grey or Friends Grey if you have my paints. And then we're going to come into those shadows again before everything fully dries. And really come on the tip of the brush and add that shadow. Look at the reference picture, you can see where these dark shadows are. And some of them will just be to one side of the pile and not in between every one. So this one is very thin just on this side. And the next one's a bit darker. Nice strong shadow on this one. Have your paint nice and creamy again. And you want to do this whilst that colour underneath is still fluid, still damp. Now I believe in Olney, where the pancake race started, they still celebrate every year the tradition, and there's lots of stories as to how it came about. And the one I like the best is there was a lady cooking her pancakes for the last day of Lent, and she heard the church bells ringing and ran into the church still clutching her frying pan, which I think is a wonderful story, and that's the one I tend to want to believe. Just taking a bit more of my ready brown, orangey ready brown, adding a touch more colour down here along the bottom of the pancake. And then lastly, our grey colour, our dark grey brown, burnt sienna and Friends Grey or Payne's Grey, we're going to come onto the tabletop and just put that shadow under the bottom. It doesn't show very well in the reference picture, but we're going to add it in a couple of places. And then with a damp brush, I'm just going to encourage that colour out to create a shadow on the table. Touch of burnt sienna in there as well. Spreading that out onto the table. Going back in with my dark along the bottom one more time. Fabulous. Okay, now what we're going to do is take this mixture. I'm just going to mix it all together. Mix that brown and your orangey brown together. Add a bit of water to it and a touch more yellow, I think. Coming back to an ochre colour, and we're going to add a little bit more definition along some of these edges of the pancakes. Thinking about those little folds. A little bit more yellowy golden colour coming in and creating some lines for the folds of the pancakes at the edge with this slightly darker ochre over the top of our first initial glazes. Add a little fold here and there. Okay, now's the time to sort of stop and gather yourself. I'm going to add a bit more yellow back in because when I look back, yellow, I don't mean yellow, a little bit of magenta back in because when I look back, it's still not quite orange enough. So I'm mixing up this orangey brown with that same mix that I had earlier, and just remember your watercolours dry back slightly lighter as well, so you may find you want to come in with a bit of stronger colour here and there. A bit more pattern bouncing on the top of the pancake. And some of your shadows you might want to darken again with a little bit of the Friends Grey or Payne's Grey to keep that separation between each pancake. Fabulous! I'm loving it all except for the splatters that I've hit on the side here of my hand. So whilst I pause, give you a little pause, I'm just going to remove some of those so they're not so obvious. And just running a little bit of that golden colour through my shadow. Okay, now we need to let this dry or hit it with the hairdryer. I don't mean hit it. Just dry things off of your hairdryer. Just before I do that, I want that shadow under this one a bit stronger. You keep looking and you keep seeing where you need to take shadows a bit stronger so you really get that separation. And then I'm going to dry it off once I'm happy. So just reworking, going back over places. Making sure I'm going right up to the edge of the syrup as it runs down. And a little bit darker up here. Nudging up, cutting in around our syrup runs. Now, another thing you can do, if you find that your colours become too strong, you can go in and lift some colour out, and I'm going to do that now. Just take a flat brush. It works better with a flat brush, and my top pancake I want a bit lighter, so into the dry paint I'm just taking a damp brush and removing some of my initial paint layer. So just work that brush over, and if you want to, dab it with your tissue as well, which will get more colour off. And I've kind of ended up with a flat shape at the top here, so I'm just working into that, lifting a bit more pattern on the top of my pancake. And this edge here, the paint's gone a little bit further than I want it, so I'm just going to work back along with my flat brush and lift out that edge. Really easy to do. As I say, particularly as we're doing something that's quite flat, using a flat brush will really help. Come into those grooves, pull out some colour, and in doing so creating a strong highlight here. I want this pancake a bit lighter, so just work backwards and forwards. Use your tissue and keep cleaning your brush, because your brush keeps picking up more colour. Tissue, dab down, bring that highlight back. I'm going to do a couple more of those, particularly next to the dark, above those shadows. Backwards and forwards, clean your brush off. Taking this one a bit lighter along this edge. Now, some papers allow you to lift better than others, and some colours lift better than others. Burnt sienna is a good lifting colour. It's quite friendly. Just emphasising some of those edges, making them brighter, making them stand out more, and picking up any paint that I accidentally put somewhere that I no longer want. Okay, so I'm not going to need my hairdryer, because by doing this extra step, everything's pretty much going to be dry, and we can mix up the colour that we want for our honey or syrup, golden syrup. There we go. I'm just going to have a bite. I'm just going to take a bite of my pancake because this is making me hungry. Okay. Before we start mixing our colour, if you look at the reference picture, there are really bright lights, and to show the transparency of our syrup we need to keep these highlights, and I've actually drawn them on to my picture, and because it's see-through we can also see the pattern on the pancake through the syrup, but we're going to add that as we go. I'm just going to clean out my palette. Okay, I'm going to move to my smaller brush, my size 6 brush. We're going to take yellow. If you're using Hansa yellow, it's a beautiful bright yellow, a bit too bright for our pancakes. Let me just move that into shot. So I'm going to add a little bit of magenta, just a tiny bit at a time, to change this and make it a little bit more orangey. And lo and behold, there's my orange. Going to go again. Going to take my yellow beside my puddle and just pull some of that orange into the yellow. So we end up wanting 2 yellows, one stronger, one more orange. A little bit more magenta in there to create my orange syrup, my golden syrup. Now if you find it's too orange, just add a tiny bit of your burnt sienna in, but be careful because you don't want your colour to be the same as the pancake, otherwise it's not going to show up. So I'm just going to mix that up again. My nice slug of yellow, bringing in my magenta to make that orange. So orange and yellow are the colours we're going to work with, and we will use a little bit with some burnt sienna in as well. So you can see the 3 colours here: yellow, yellow and magenta with a touch of burnt sienna. And we're going to start with the yellow. Make sure your brush is nice and clean. Into the yellow, avoiding those highlights. Brushing that on. You can see how different that colour is.
You know, it doesn't matter if you
to the pancake, and leaving my highlight along the edge of this piece of syrup. This section of syrup.
know what else I like?
Coming up to the highlight and underneath.
When you bite into it.
Leaving that sliver of light. It's going to make all the difference if you keep some white showing through. Okay, coming down this drizzle down the side, I'm just going to leave the middle and just come down the edge and then into our syrup, balancing precariously on the pancake and avoiding those highlights again. I've penciled them in. Now whilst this is still wet, I'm going to come into my orange and look where I want the colour stronger, working wet into wet, dropping some orange over the top of the yellow, and also focusing where I can see the pattern of the pancake underneath. Just the tip of my brush, bringing some orange tones, wet into wet, into my yellow. And lastly, I'm going to go again with my slightly darker orange and pick up some of the colour you can see through the pancake. Touch more burnt sienna in there. So it's going to look glassy, but not the white areas. Okay, so we're seeing through and we're seeing the colour underneath. And look across your syrup where you can see the colour from the pancake underneath. and just drop a bit of this burnt sienna in. A little bit of burnt sienna up the top here. My burnt sienna orange mix. And that will give you that glassy look to your syrup. Let's go again. We'll do a bigger area this time, and I'm leaving this section just wet. Okay, in that middle, clear. Okay, we're going to go on top of our butter with our yellow, avoiding those highlights again, cutting around any bright colours. If you struggle to see where they are, half close your eyes and squint at your picture reference, and you'll see where those slivers need to be. Now I've done my pencil drawing quite dark so that you can see my pencil drawing. When you're drawing, you should draw lighter. So bring in that yellow. It's our base for our wet and wet work. All over the syrup, just avoiding the highlights. Leave the paper dry. And the paint will not go there unless you put it there. A bit more yellow in my puddle. Cutting in again around my highlights using my size 6 brush, giving us a nice base. Now this layer should be quite wet, quite fluid, so that when we drop our orange in, it will dance in the colour that's already down. So I'm taking a bit of this orange, where I can see the syrup stronger up the top here. I'm not going to do the drizzle landing. And just picking out those spots, nice and wet brush so that the colours mingle together. If your brush is too dry, that orange is just going to sit there and we want it to move. Again, looking where there's reflections or it's glassy so that we can see through to the pancake underneath. Going to leave that section as it tumbles over the side. Come to the next bit, add a touch of orange alongside, dropping it into your yellow, and let it do what watercolour does best, bleed together. That looks lovely and glassy. Now I don't want to go on with my brown just yet because everything's still quite wet. So I'm going to carry on with my yellow down the other drizzle. Nice and watered down, remember, so that everything flows. Avoiding your white highlights to give it that glassy look, that shiny look. Cutting in carefully all the time around those white highlights. Now if you do this too dry, your orange isn't going to mix in, and equally if your orange is too dry, that's not going to mix in. So you do want this quite fluid. Dropping some orange in where I can see the pattern of the pancake through, and I want it a brighter colour because we're seeing it through the syrup, coming alongside my highlight there. It's going to make the highlight really stand out. Into that lovely syrupy colour at the side, coming alongside the highlight again. You'll notice I'm still leaving yellow showing through, picking my spots, moving around, just dropping this orange in. Fabulous. Doesn't that give it a lovely glassy look? And now I'll come back with my orange with burnt sienna and darken some spots. Nice and creamy so it doesn't spread too far. If your brush is really wet, dry your brush off, pick up the colour, and then we're going to put that indication of being able to see through to the layer behind. So particularly as the syrup folds over the shadows, I'm just going to touch in some darker colours into my syrup with this burnt sienna mix. Coming alongside some of those highlights as well. But mainly it's about what we can see underneath. So paying attention to what's beside those spots of the syrup. I'm just going to go back to my middle one because I missed a bit of the shadow underneath. It's still damp, so I can come along and just dot in that colour. And then I'm going to come in nice and dark alongside my butter and just touch in and lift, touch and lift. That's all you want to do. Fabulous. And lastly, now this is dried back a bit, I will add some of the pattern that we can see through. A little bit more magenta in my brownie mix. You don't want to do this while it's soaking wet. You want it to have just started drying off. Picking up that pattern that we can see from underneath. Again here, I'm going to go a bit darker, so adding some burnt umber in here. This slice here, we can see, we need to show and indicate that we can see through, but not over the white. Okay, the white is a highlight. So we want to leave the white, but over the golden syrup, where we can see the pancake through it, particularly around these shadows underneath the pancakes, then we want to drop our darker colour in, and that will show the glassiness of our pancake. That's the trick. Just working around, adding that in. A little bit more pattern on the surface. Fab. Okay. Lastly is our butter. Well, I'm just going to darken the back of my syrup a little bit more and tidy up my lines at the back there. And soften that in with a damp brush. Just blend that away. Because I've put fresh paint over dried paint, I'm going to take my yellow on the top of the syrup a little bit stronger. Remember, that's yellow with a hint of magenta running through. Just tweaking, adding a touch more yellow here and there. Just want it a little bit brighter and stronger. Okay, I need to lift out a bit of the syrup that's dribbling over here. It needs to be clearer from the reference picture. So this time I'm going to use my round brush because it's a round shape that I'm lifting, and just lift out that highlight. And here around the edge of the syrup, just reworking the paint and lifting out. And the reference picture makes the butter look very light, so I'm just going to give it a very light coating of yellow around the side of the butter and even lighter on the front. Just picking up a bit of the colour from the side and pulling it across the front. A bit creamier, more yellow at the sides. Okay, last bit of tidying up. I'm going to do a glaze to pick up any white areas that I don't like. So down here is very white. There's a couple of areas I've missed. So now everything's dry, I'm going to take this very light wash. That's the yellow with the bit of magenta in. And I'm just going to give another coat, really light, so I haven't got any white of the paper still showing, other than the highlights. And this is just a glaze coat, kind of your pick up any bits that you've left that you might have missed. Really gently with this layer so you don't disturb the paint underneath. And I just want to strengthen my shadow under the butter. And the butter goes back through there. Little tweak on my syrup at the top. Just strengthening up that shape of the butter sitting on top. And there we go, our stack of wonderful pancakes. Oh. I hope you enjoyed painting and eating your pancakes this Shrove Tuesday. I'm just going to play the video again at the end that tells you all about Watercolour Wednesday, which is my subscription service that you can join from just £5 a month. It gives you access to over 100 video tutorials already in the library and a new watercolour filmed live on YouTube every Wednesday for you to watch whenever suits you. Take care, have fun, have a great pancake day, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now. Bye. Yum, yum.